So let's get started. And I think most of you know that I'm Bonnie Bell. I'm principal of Bell Investment Advisors, and I'm the director of our career and life coaching. So at Bell Investment Advisors, we do investment management, financial planning, and career and life coaching. Because we say it isn't just about your money, it's about your life. So to fragment up one's life, my money's over here, my life's over here, my career's over here, just doesn't make sense to it. The point of it all is to have a good life, right? Most people are born wanting a good life, but we say just crossing your fingers and hoping that you'll have a good life is not a really good strategy. So we like to help people with a momentum-based strategy in all areas of their lives so that you learn how to build positive momentum, avoid negative momentum. So we're all about that. We do lots of educational things. This is just an example tonight. And we were so excited last summer. Jim and I went to the Lair the Bear camp, Cal alumni camp. Have any of you been there? Yeah, there's usually a few, yeah. So they often have great speakers that just happen to be up there, either graduates or guests or faculty at UC Berkeley. So when we went last summer with our family, Kelly McLean was there, and we heard, they're these great people who come and give talks. So we went to the campfire one night, and Kelly was giving this presentation. And it was so fabulous. We just immediately looked at each other and said, let's go talk to her and see if maybe we can get her to come talk for us. Because we usually do a big seminar like this once a year. And we were so thrilled to be able to get her. So she's a distinguished professor from the Haas School of Business, as you read, and that's part of why you're here. So we're just thrilled that you all come tonight and that we know that you're really in for a fabulous evening. So thank you for coming. And Jim's going to say a few words too.
Thank you, Bonnie, and thank you all for being here tonight. It was very heartening meeting you and talking with you in the reception beforehand. Bonnie and I are very proud to create a community that represents the quality that you bring to our civilization and our culture. So I was tearing up hearing some of your stories tonight, and I just want to thank you for honoring us by joining us for this discourse tonight that I think is going to be very powerful for you. In America, where all people are created equal under the law, it's astonishing that equal pay for equal work is not defended or supported by our courts or our culture. And we camped with Kelly, so I just call her Dr. Kelly. She's going to be talking about that tonight, and I'll introduce Maravik Hammond in just a minute, and she'll give you more background about Dr. Kelly. Dr. Kelly has many honors and titles. The one I like the most is that she's the expert on sustainability at the Haas Business School. And I resonate very strongly with the notion of sustainability. I like it better than socially responsible. What I like about it is that sustainability integrates socially responsibility with economics. And Kelly's going to talk about that tonight. And from my point of view, no initiative will persist or succeed unless the economic fundamentals back it up. And one of the concerns I have about our culture and our point in time right now is that we're not putting the best team on the field. Women are kept out of the boardrooms, out of leadership, and it's really shameful. We're not going to sustain. It's not sustainable in the world today, as competitive as it is, if we're not putting the best players on the field and rewarding them for the contribution that they make. We're very excited about our association with the Haas Business School and with Dr. Kelly specifically. So I want to bring up Maravik Hammond. Maravik is our senior investment advisor, and she's our lead investment analyst and portfolio manager right beside our chief investment officer, Matt King, who's also here tonight. Maravik has a long background as an equity analyst and fixed income analyst. We're very proud that she's been a member of our team. And it's Maravik who had the initiative to start the Women's Roundtable, which has been flourishing now for 2 years. And we're going to keep doing that, and this is an offshoot of that. We're very happy to see the men who are here tonight. It's maybe more important for you to hear this message than it is for the women. But we're all together. And so Maravik, please come up and introduce Dr. Kelly for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. One of the things that was really interesting to me when after Jim and Bonnie came back from Lair of the Bear, they were very excited. I mean, more excited than they normally are because they had this great, amazing presentation that they just had. So we started talking about it. They told us what Dr. Kelly's presentation and thesis was. So just like any person nowadays, what do? First thing I heard that, I cyber-stalked her and started Googling in terms of what can I find out about this Dr. Kelly. So I had the privilege to actually watch her presentation that she did on TED Talks in San Francisco. It was very fascinating because I thought, wow, this is a woman who is not only authentic, but she is very relatable. And then the thing that I thought was really important that got me sold on her was she said, well, I was in spin class one day, and then the music from this band called Everclear, which, by the way, is an LA band, and I know that because I grew up in Santa Monica, so I knew Everclear. I'm just like, okay, she doesn't need to speak anymore. I like her already. I know the band. So, and the song that happened to be playing on her spin class was Volvo Driving Soccer Mom. So I'm just like, okay, that's it. I told them she has got to come to our presentation. So needless to say, I was definitely sold. I look at some of the research projects that she did. There's certainly a lot to be said about sustainability, and it's not, very meant to be just women only, but I think everybody in this room could benefit from what she has to say. So without further ado, I introduce Dr. Kelly McElhaney.
Thank you. I asked her to get up and sing Volvo Driving Soccer Mom, but she refused. Could you give her more wine? Because she still may sing it at the end. I just want to tell you a personal story, which is not how I intended to start, but that song had such an impact. I was doing a spin class at the Claremont Resort when I used to be able to afford to work out there. And I'm already sweating, and I'm spinning, and I heard that song, and I was just like, oh my God, that's me, and that's not where I thought I was going to be. And I had been driving to school that week, and I was in this lineup of cars in my neighborhood. And it was BMW, Mercedes, Volvo, and I just remember my palms getting really sweaty and thinking, how did I get here? Because it's not really authentically who I am. It was a turning point in my life, which I won't go into. But thank you to Jim and Bonnie, because you don't often meet people in jeans and a sweatshirt who kind of resonate with you and say, wow, you're just this amazing speaker, because I was in jeans and a sweatshirt presenting out in the middle of nowhere, which is an unusual place for me to present. And I had a really cantankerous professor in the audience who was tough on me, but I'm used to it. But my young girls were with me, and they were so pissed off. They were like, Mommy, we're going to take him out. And so it was a really fun event. But anyway, I'm really happy to be here. And just 2 caveats. Cal is playing at 7 right now. So if somebody wants to, I don't want you to be on your smartphones, but if somebody wants to give me the update, that'd be great. There was a second caveat. Oh, yeah, SC. So it could be bad. But I do a lot of work with the football team, and I'm hugely respectful of Cal. But anyway, let me stop. The other caveat is if anybody wants to bring me 1 glass of white wine, I'd be much better. I hear I'm a better speaker with white wine, or with wine. So I'm going to start out with a video, which I didn't mean. That sounds dictatorial. Don't go, Jim. Somebody already went. Like, what an amazing man. that he's the first person who gets up. But somebody, I'm going to start out with a video, which I'll just get started with, and then I'll talk to you afterwards.
All around me are familiar faces, worn out places, worn out faces, bright and early for their daily races, going nowhere, and their tears are filling up their glasses. No expression, no expression. Mad world, mad world.
So I probably watched that commercial 1,200 times, and it still gives me chills because I have two daughters who are 15 and 13, and this is the world I've sent them out into. And the other reason is because I'm a female, and I have probably called okay, let me scratch that. I have definitely called other women these names. So I want to start out by saying two things I get mistaken for in my career, both in sustainability and in this investing in women's world. In sustainability, I get called a do-gooder and an angel, and I'm not. I think if we don't deal with the water crisis in the world, then Coca-Cola is not going to have a product. So for me, my sustainability world is very economically and profit-driven. In the women's space, I've been called an angry feminist, which always makes me laugh because I get called a lot of names by people who know me, and angry is just never one of them. And I shave my armpits, and I wear lipstick, and it cracks me up. I don't think this is not a male person's fault by any stretch. This is a woman and men's challenge, and I'll go into talking to you about that more. But this has a huge impact. How many of you don't have to answer out loud, have been called, how many of you females have been called some of the names that you saw in that commercial? And probably a lot of us have. So this is today's talk tonight. It's a pretty simple. I'm a simple person for an academician, and you won't find me professorial at all. I really will be relatable because I am an ex-banker, and I never really went into academia with the thought of doing disconnected research in my office alone that went into some journal that sat on a shelf that nobody ever read. I'm actually really interested in creating change. So my simple question, which I had actually when I was holding my first daughter in my arms, the 15-year-old, do we live in a gender-forward world? And at the time, I was pretty idealistic, and I thought that for sure I was. And now I am much less idealistic. And with that Pantene commercial, what also gives me chills is it's a commercial. But empirically, the research supports everything that commercial dictates. So I like to bridge the academic world with the practitioner world. I got a great introduction. I was a Volvo driving soccer mom. I'm not anymore. I'm still a soccer mom, but I definitely don't drive a Volvo. My area, as Jim said, my core area of expertise is in sustainability, but I came to academia as a banker. So you should know I'm a pretty hardcore capitalist, and everything my lens is return on investment, ROI, because if a company ceases to have a return on investment, they cease to be a company. So it doesn't matter how much they're working on investing in women or investing in clean water, they just cease to exist. So that's me, forget all that stuff, but this is more me authentically. These are my two daughters, and I'll tell you why I call them lionesses in a moment. And as I said, they're 15 and 13, and they're definitely giving me a run for my money. You all met them. They were going to beat up this angry professor. They had no qualms about that. And it is what drives my work, particularly more now. And I want to tell you that normally when I speak to academicians, like this academic in the audience, which I didn't really tailor the presentation for him because something says when you're sitting around a campfire that you don't want to have a long title that has a colon and a semicolon, because that makes me appear smarter, but not necessarily around a campfire in a Berkeley sweatshirt and jeans. So I call my research the lioness factor. And I actually learned the concept of the lioness, or the reality of the lioness, from P. Diddy. It's a really long story, but all I will tell you is that, I think he was Puff Daddy at the time, he really pointed out to me the difference in the jungle that I did not know between lions and lionesses. So what do lions get up and do every day, my camp mate?
Well, the lions sit around and the lionesses go out and do the hunting.
This is a lion. Some people would say, who's the smarter person in this situation? But he actually gets up and finds the biggest shade tree in the jungle and goes to sleep. This is the lioness. She is the one who gets up and does the hunting, gathering, maiming, ripping, shredding, and brings home everything to the cubs and to the lion. And so P. Diddy said, this title of your research is so boring. You should call it the lioness factor. And so I've been bold enough to call it the lioness factor, and it really resonates to me. And that's why I'm so proud to be the daughter of lionesses and just know a lot about men who have a lioness as a wife or at home, tend to be the best sponsors and advancers of women in the business world, and I'll get into that in a moment. But who cares about women? Like, why should we care? You talked about it. It's 52% of the 52% of the population, and Warren Buffett is one of my favorite people who says, look, if I had to compete against 52% of the population, which I didn't, I would have never have been as successful as I am today. And why would you play poker with half a deck? It just makes no sense. And Jim said that in a much more eloquent way. It just doesn't make empirical sense. So in my research, I try to get rid of the word issues. It just kills me when I hear women's issues, because I don't think we are actually an issue. I think we're part of a solution. And I think we represent an opportunity. And if you look at Harvard Business Review says we represent the largest market opportunity in the world, and I'll put some numbers behind that. If you saw Half the Sky, I'm not going to show you the trailer tonight, but it's a fabulous documentary. It came from a book that husband and wife team, Nicholas Kristof and Sheryl Wudon, who are New York Times journalists, went around and followed the plight of women in 6 countries. And they really looked at what's happening with women, but how are women part of the solution? So getting children out of brothels, getting women in India out of prostitution, getting women in Africa away from maternal mortality when it's not necessary, or female genital mutilation. So I'm going to talk to you about a lot of things that you wouldn't normally hear in an investment advisory organization. It's a fantastic documentary, and they say that women are actually part of the solution. They're not part of the problem. And Hillary Clinton, no political aspirations here, that she says we represent the largest opportunity in the world, and she really says, in past centuries there have been things like slavery and dictatorships that we have had to deal with. The biggest issue in our century that we need to solve is the plight of women in the world. And I should tell you, the first time I showed Half the Sky in my MBA classroom at Berkeley, I had a woman stand up from the back of the room, and it was a tiered classroom, and I was down the front, and she walked down the tier, and I saw her teeter. She fainted. Like, this generation they just have no concept of a 2-year-old who was sold into a brothel in Cambodia. And it was overwhelming for her. So that was a big aha moment, that as much as social media and the connectivity that they have to the world is there, they're very selective in terms of what they're getting fed, and they just don't have a sense of the greater world. And I never set out as a professor to make somebody faint. Often I'll make them cry, but fainting was a little over the top. So let's just take a quick view of what's happening in the business world. The percentages aren't really the thing to fixate on here. So Fortune 500 board seats held by women, 16.6%. The issue is the plateau. This is the data set that really frustrates me, is that we aren't moving the needle. As much as we are 52% of the population, 60% of college graduates, 60% of PhD candidates, we aren't moving the needle. And if you go down into corporate officer positions in the Fortune 500, it's still at that 16 seems to be this threshold that we can't cross, but it is the plateau that most concerns me. Why aren't we moving the needle? Because there seems to be empirical evidence that we're moving in lots of other ways, but we just aren't moving the needle in terms of corporate leadership. Kind of a sad ad. Women like men, only cheaper. And I look a lot at the wage gap. And I argue a lot with economists who say what is spoken as 77 cents per dollar. Anybody have a guess of what it is in Silicon Valley? 49 cents. Yeah, so, and you can't have helped but live in the past 8 months and not seen evidence of how the Valley is doing least well in this space.
I misquoted you, I said 53%.
Well, yeah, that'd be-
So it's worse.
It's worse.
I said.
And again, I want to say that that's not just men's fault. There are a lot of things that we do as women to undermine ourselves in terms of, and it's policy that we don't have equal pay at the top, and we don't have paid maternity leave. We're one of 2 countries in the world, Papua New Guinea and the US, who doesn't have mandatory paid maternity, but you're getting me off track. So it's 77 cents on the dollar, and some economists get in there and say if you control for, 2 things are my favorite arguments from economists, who are typically men because men matriculate into economics a little bit higher pace. Well, women spend fewer hours per week at work, so that's why we are lower. And secondly, we tend to populate functions like human resources or marketing or less highly paid functions in the company. And so when they normalize or college major, we tend to not major in science or math. And when they normalize for that data, they're all proud because it goes up to 81 cents. And I'm thinking, woo, good for you, 4 cents on the dollar. Is it not still bad? So my work looks at very empirically and economically driven, why should we invest in women? Why does it make sense for all of us in this room, for business leaders, for consumer-facing companies to invest in women? Intel is a company who gets it. I'm going to show you a trailer of a fantastic movie that they sponsored that came out in 2013, at the end of 2013, and it's called Girl Rising. And the sort of background of why Intel sponsored this fantastic movie is because they did a women in digital study, and they looked at how few women across the world, particularly in the developing world, have access to digital. And what happens when women have access to digital is their security goes up, their education level goes up, their access to pricing for their crops that they are growing goes up, and it's a bigger consumer market for Intel.
Tonight, one of the bravest girls in the world.
Malala Yousafzai became renowned for demanding girls be given the right to education.
Shot in the head on her school bus.
She was a student who wanted to learn, but now she's fighting to live.
Come on, skinny love, just last the year. Or a little soul, we were never here.
I was 11 years old when my father arranged for me to be married.
Staring at the sink of
تروح المدرسة؟
I had heard about the thousands of girls sold to men in those places. I can't really talk about everything that happened to me here, but I will never forget. We have come to this house, the house of her master, to say, you must set her free.
Regrets collect like old friends, here to relive your darkest moments. I can see no way, I can see no way. And all of the ghouls come out to play.
There is no miracle here, just a girl with dreams.
I will read, I will study, I will learn. If you try to stop me, I will just try harder. If you stop me, there will be other girls who rise up and take my place. I am change.
I am my own master now. I feel as though I have power.
Now there's nothing to stop me.
I feel I can do anything.
So Intel paid for this movie to be produced. You can actually get a copy to show inside of your corporations or to show inside of local theaters. And it's really powerful. It's very uplifting. And they talk about how, you know, at the risk of offending anybody in this audience, my research suggests that my predecessors, my predecessors, the women that went ahead of me, punted on this issue because they acted like men. My generation punted on this issue because we just accepted the rules as they were presented to us. And this generation says, screw the rules. Sorry, I'm trying to be really clean. I told you I have a nasty mouth. Screw the rules. I don't know how else to say it other than worse. We're not going to accept them. And it's such a privilege for me to work amongst college students and MBAs and be a parent of teenagers because they're just not going to sit down and take it. And that's one of the best things about this movie. But I'm going to show you two other videos from Nike, who also really gets the power of investing in young girls. And the first video I'm going to show you empirically shows you why you would invest in a 14-year-old girl in the developing world. And the second video is just more of a storytelling video. It's a commercial that they launched at the last Summer Olympics. It gives me chills, and there's a lot of economic analysis that I could talk to, and I will show you some economic analysis, but one thing to just say out loud or to you up front, if you invest $1 in a girl in the developing world, 70 cents on that dollar goes back to elevating the community. She educates herself, she educates her family, she gets better health care, her family gets better health, she contributes formally to the economy and the GDP rises. If you invest $1 in a man or a boy, sort of a teenage boy in the developing world, 30 cents of that dollar goes back to the community. 70 cents goes to three things. What? Beer. Alcohol, absolutely. Gambling, sorry, what did you say? Women and gambling. And it's just, and if you look at global funding in the developing world, fewer than 2%, less than 2%, sorry, of our funding in the developing world goes towards women. So it's a complete mismatch. And Nike gets it. And that number there was 600 million. They're now up to 1 billion young girls that they're supporting with their Girl Effect program.
When I was growing up, girls just didn't run in public.
No one on my all-boys team would pass to me.
Dad told me I couldn't be a boxer. He said I was too small.
There was a guy who tried to spit on me and then pushed me out of his way.
There comes a point where you have to be sure of yourself. People aren't used to women being so passionate. It scares them.
One day, I just said it doesn't matter what other people think.
I'm a fashion model who can dunk.
I'm a girl. That doesn't mean I have to wear a skirt.
Doesn't mean I can't get all fired up. They used to say, that girl is crazy.
But then I just kept winning.
I didn't set out to dominate. I just did.
Somebody's got to be the best. So why not me?
I'm 55 years old and I run close to 70 miles a week.
I never felt like quitting.
There's something telling me to do it every single day. Just want to play ball.
This was the Olympics that we saw the impact of Title IX, and I talked to a lot of business and economics audiences, and they hate the word quota. Hate it. It'll never happen in the US. Women don't want it to happen because we don't want to be seen as getting elevated because of a quota system. Men don't want it because it's reverse discrimination. Title IX and in the academy and in sports said, we need a quota. We don't have women's sports teams. My father is a retired athletic director, and he was one of the authors of Title IX. And I just see the impact. If you look at the last Olympics, women's gold medals outstripped male gold medals. Every country for the first time in the Summer Olympics sent at least one woman. Even Saudi Arabia sent a track runner. We had our first women's coach, actually from Cal, the swimming coach who coached the men's and women's Olympic swimming team. So if you don't think quotas work, just look at Title IX and how it has worked. And I won't go into detail about my view on quotas, but I've come full circle because I also thought, I don't want a quota. Why would I want to be part of a quota? And now I see that they actually have an impact. So let's talk about the economic analysis. I gave you some fluffy stories. Let's look at the economics behind the fluffy stories. My favorite data set is an entirely huge data set of economics. And it's released every year at Davos, at the World Economic Forum. And it is co-authored by 3 professors, one of whom is a colleague of mine, Laura Tyson at the Haas School of Business. It's called the Gender Gap Index. And they measure, so you want to see parity of 1-to-1 inside of a country of women and men. And they rate it on 4 buckets: educational attainment, health and survival, political empowerment, and economic participation. So are these women actually participating in the formal economy, not the gray economy of the country? And they link a 1-to-1 parity with a higher GDP of a country. So there's no argumentation from corporate leaders, country leaders and corporations who are trying to do business. So we look at these 4 buckets and how women are performing across the globe. What's interesting to note here is where women are doing best globally. We're doing really well on health, really well on education, increasingly well on economic participation. We're not moving at all on politics. And how many of you are in politics? How many of you are working in politics? Not voting, but working in politics. So typically every audience I ask, 0 hands go up. And then I say, how many of you aspire to work in politics? And 0 hands go up. And 1, good luck. This is a huge problem, and this is where we are doing least well. So if you ever had political aspirations, and I do not, although I've been persuaded to go into the space, I swear like a truck driver, it's never going to work for me. But this is where we're not moving the needle. So I wanted to show you the top 20, just because I thought you might be interested. But I thought you might be interested in the US, and so I had to go to the top 24. So just to give you a sense, Iceland, Finland, Norway, Sweden, Philippines, and here's the United States at number 23. So as much as we might think we live in the developed world and the leading world, we're not doing that well. And the number you want to see is 1.0 because that's pure economic parity. Without women in the workforce, the GDP, that's global. In the US, if we didn't have women in the workforce, we would have a 25% lower GDP. And that's pure economics. And every country, prime minister, president, leader gets it because they want their GDP. And there's another metric in this study called Company Competitive Index. They want that to go up. So the 2 outlier countries, by the way, are Saudi Arabia and Japan. because women in those two countries are highly educated, but they very lowly participate in the formal economy. And so the Japanese prime minister has stood up very loudly in the past 2 years saying, we're going to elevate the support system for women. And I just spent 11 days in Saudi Arabia this past April, and it's a huge privilege to get into the country because it's obviously hard to get in. And I taught a women's leadership program. But what was amazing is to see the actual status of women inside that country. They can't drive, and I know that that's the issue that we in the Western world clamp onto. Personally, if I had a driver like I had for 11 days in Saudi, I'd be super psyched to not have to drive to Pleasanton for volleyball carpool. That's not their biggest issue. They have, for the first time last year, sent a woman to the Olympics, invited 30 women to serve on the Shura Council, which is their political council. I know this is kind of strange to brag about, but they have allowed women to work in shops. So I had horror stories of women telling me that they used to get fitted, for example, for bras by men because that's who was allowed to be working in shops. But they've made great strides for a country like Saudi Arabia in a really short time. This is one of my favorite slides. Look at the economic power that we represent. And it says here we will control $18 trillion worth of spending. It's actually gone up to $19 trillion worth of spending by the end of 2014. So, for example, that's twice China GDP and India GDP combined. And yet if you look at companies, they have a China growth strategy, they have an India growth strategy, and they don't have a women's growth strategy. And the easiest thing I can tell CEOs is you're leaving $19 trillion worth of money on the table, and then they wake up. We just represent a large amount of spending power. Great study that has come out 2 years ago by Credit Suisse, and they have a new study that just came out a month ago. The first study that I show you the data for here looks at women on boards. And companies who have one or more, which is a really sad statistic that we can only say one or more, but our N is pretty small. Companies who have one or more women on the board outperform on stock performance, particularly in volatile markets. I have a colleague at Haas who claims over and over that he does not care about women. He's a finance professor, not that he doesn't care about them, but this is not the focus of his research. But he did a fascinating study in 2009 where he went on trading floors on Wall Street and he tested testosterone levels of the traders. And women have testosterone and so do men, so this was not just a male issue. He found a distinct correlation between the higher the testosterone level, the higher the bad risk of their trades. The more trades they made in one day, and just really bad, stupid risk, men and women. So there's this linkage between not good calculated risk and testosterone, which is, again, women and men both have testosterone. And one of my least favorite experiences was presenting 5 years ago at Fortune's Most Powerful Women's Conference. And I literally went there the first night and fled back to my hotel room, and like any self-respecting, at the time, 46-year-old woman, I called my dad. I'm like, God, this is horrible. Like, I just don't fit in. These women are just, they're sharks, and I don't know what to do. And he's an ex-pro football player, and he said, Kel, you've just met the biggest D line in your life. And your only job is to plow through it. So I tried to. It wasn't very successful that year, and now I go and I love it, and I'm totally, I love it now. But I remember sitting in the gym, working out in the gym, and I was between Maria Bartiromo from CNN Money, or is she? I think she's still, and some CEO of some company who I didn't know, and I was too embarrassed to ask. And they were arguing. They both were bragging first about having had their testosterone levels checked, and they were arguing over whose was higher. And I'm standing there in the gym thinking, and you're proud of this? Because here's what it's linked to. Anyway, return on equity in women, one or more women on the board versus 0 women on the board. Women in market return across the board, everything. Return on equity, total return on sales, stock performance in volatile markets. Bankruptcy risk goes down by 20%. You can even see this out into the developing world with microfinance. So if you look at microfinance in the developing world, women have a 98% payback on microfinance loans. It's hugely high. Men are in the 70s. So it's just a different world when you invest in women. And it's not saying divest in men. It's investing also in women. In terms of our spending power, the segment I focus on the most, since I have an ex-pro football player as a dad, is the NFL, because they screwed up on every level with this domestic violence. I mean, obviously on the moral and ethical issues, but they really messed up because women have been their fastest growing fan base, their fastest growing ticket purchaser base, and their fastest growing apparel base. And the NFL got this early on, and they stopped this whole concept of pinking it and shrinking it so that we could get a pink 49ers shirt, and it's not their color. It didn't really work for us. The NFL figured that we represent a pretty significant market share, and so they were just going to make a little more, less boxy mesh football jerseys, but things that we might like to wear, and they really were doing well. And that's why I think they messed up on so many levels on this domestic violence issue, but they really messed up in reading that women were a huge target market for them. So we have a lot of spending power. Women in management, women in leadership. This is a misleading study, and the title of the study, which I will never put on one of my slides, is Women Are Better Leaders Than Men. And that's absolutely the wrong words. Women are different leaders than men. It's not better or worse. It's such a divisive argument, and it just shuts down anything that follows. But Zenger Folkman, who is a large search firm, looks at the 16 leadership competencies that are most linked to better financial performance of the firm. And they show that women score better on 15 of the 16 leadership competencies. I think it's a bit of a stretch, because if you look at the difference at the bottom, it's not that different. But there are things that women, if acting as women, and I'll show you later that we haven't always acted as women, but women, if they are actually true to their sort of natural feminine characteristics and leadership traits, do things differently than men. A couple of thoughts from that. Women are different in the sense that we elicit pride and respect from our employees. We communicate our vision more. We just communicate more broadly, more effectively. We empower and mentor subordinates, particularly female subordinates at a different level. Even with male subordinates, when I talk to them, I do research on what are your most admired leadership attributes. Nurturing is a hugely admired leadership attribute of this millennial generation. They need it because they've been so overly nurtured at home that they get into the workplace and they still need it. And that is a really admired leadership attribute that women tend to bring into the workplace at a higher percentage. Men are less likely to bond or connect with their subordinates except on the golf course, which is where they tend to most bond, and that's great. I mean, I am not a golf fan, but kudos to anybody who wants to spend an entire day on the golf course. But they do much more bonding there, but it's an informal network to which women are less likely to be a part of for a whole host of reasons. And it's interesting, they're less likely to reward their employees for actual performance. They will reward employees for golf course, time at the bar, things that just are outside of the actual work performance, and it just happens. We're all human, and if I spend 8 hours on a Saturday with a guy on the golf course, it's likely to factor into my views of his performance. Great study that just came out looked at collective intelligence of groups, and while you might think that collective intelligence would be linked to IQ, individual IQ, additively in the group, it is actually linked to having women as a part of the group along with men. And what's so fascinating about this study, which it's one study, so I don't want to overstate it, but the more women in the group, the higher the collective intelligence of the group goes. And this is the same for diversity. Groups who have diversity make better decisions because they represent more views. Companies who have better diversity launch more new products every year. One of my favorites, I'm doing a big project with Walmart.com or Walmart e-commerce, so they've had a million names, but Walmart Labs out here. And I don't have my iPhone, but they just launched a new product. It's probably not new so much anymore, it's a year old. But they just launched a new product with a smartphone where you can go through a store and scan along the way your items so that it's an expedited checkout at the end. And I talked to the engineering team, 1 female and 6 males. It's a great product. And the men, just talked about the engineering that went into the project, the technology, and how excited they were. The woman was sort of quiet and reticent to speak, and she stood up and said, it's a great product, but here's why I was interested. We have an incredibly high amount of credit card declines at the cash register, And in my mind, that just completely cuts the dignity of the consumer at the at the cash register. And with this product, the element that she added to the product was a running budget, so that when they got to $80 or whatever their budget was, they would stop shopping. And it was just so eye-opening, both for the male engineers who were like, wow, I never thought about that. That's really cool. And for her to be kind of quiet as she spoke up about why this was an important product to her, but to see the difference that she brought to the team. I do a lot, because I, as Jim said, started my business school teaching career in the area of sustainability. My first public outing as a woman, because I was told I was an investment banker, and a retail banker, so I definitely was not a woman. I wore neckties in gray, navy, or black, because that's what I was told I could wear, and only gold jewelry. I'm doing it today. See, I'm an investment banker. So I didn't act as a woman then. I got into academia. We are only 20% female faculty at the business school, so there are lots of reasons to act like a man. A little shout out to Haas. The average female MBA population has hovered around 25 to 29%. Haas's entering MBA class last year was 28% female. We have made an incredibly concerted effort. We went to 43% this year. Wow. A huge jump. We're all really nervous. That could indicate a blip. That could indicate a lot of things. So we're doing a lot of research on how to not have that be a blip. But how I go off on that topic. Anyway, so I outed myself as a woman, and this was how I publicly did it, because my core research area is sustainability. So I look at the economic, the environmental, and the social performance of companies. And I just did a really simple, remember my N is very small. I was looking at women on boards, and I can't do robust statistical analysis on that because my N is small. But I looked at companies with 0 women on their board or companies with 1 or more, and the linkage between their environment, social, and governance performance. So while my head was buried in the data set, Harvard, as they always do, came out with a study before mine. They just looked at philanthropic giving of companies. They did this with Catalyst. And they showed, on the left, 0 corporate directors, $970,000 given away per year. 1 or more, $27.1 million. So pretty big impact. And I don't think giving away money is always the best or only thing we should do, but it is a proxy for a benefit from corporations. And the second looked at women in the C-suite, women executive officers, and you see the same jump. The random social psychology study that I always think about when I present this, there's a great study that shows that when a man has a daughter, baby girl, his philanthropic giving in his personal life goes up and his voting record becomes more liberal, which is fascinating. You can sort of say, yeah, I get it. What was even more astounding to me is that when he has a baby boy, his giving goes down and his record goes more conservative in terms of his voting. So you can see this at the individual level all the way up to the corporate level. So I looked at ESG, and I didn't name it ESG. I was looking at Morgan Stanley ratings on ESG. So their ratings on companies, environment, social, and governance performance. And when a company has 1 or more women on the board, the most statistically significant correlation, not causality, you can't prove causality with 15% women on boards, is that the company becomes more environmentally contributing. They are more likely to manage reduce their waste, manage their water usage, invest in renewable energy, reduce their packaging, all things that are linked to saving money, by the way, for a company, because if we reduce packaging and reduce waste, we save money. The second most statistically correlated or significant area is social performance. So 1 or more women on the board, more likely that the company manages talent effectively and has succession planning in place, more likely to invest in healthcare all the way throughout their supply chain. Interestingly enough, and I think about Indra Nooyi, who's the CEO of Coca-Cola, Mukhtar Kent is Coke. Indra Nooyi is the CEO of Pepsi. And when she got on board, one of the first things she did was to look at the health and nutrition profile of Pepsi. And we can all say Pepsi is bad, but they actually have some really health. She is elevating the balance of healthier, more nutritious products. And Wall Street killed her and said, you should not be focusing on this. You should be focusing on ratcheting down on share price. So you can see evidence of this in the real world. And finally, governance. It was the least statistically correlated, but still above the level of statistical significance. And the easier way I can show you the data, but the easier thing that we found was that fewer CEOs were carted off in handcuffs. Less corruption, less fraud, less misreporting of numbers. So not only do we contribute to share price and stock performance, but we also contribute to that company making the world a better place if, and here's the huge caveat, if we use our true feminine voice, and we don't always do that. So this is where I spend a lot of my life scratching my head and going, this does not seem like rocket science. I mean, it's a pretty clear-cut case, so why are we still seeing Silicon Valley at 49 cents on the dollar, and the consistent stories coming out of the Valley on the statistics of women to men, the sexual harassment, the things that are going on. And here's the rub. First of all, and Sheryl Sandberg talks about this in her book, Lean In, and Forrest your son was talking about this. We all went to the same school of gender bias. There's one university called the University of Gender Bias, and we all went to it in many ways. You could actually go into a store today and see these t-shirts for real. The first one says, I'm too pretty to do my homework, so my brother has to do it for me. Smart like dad, pretty like mommy. You can buy these shirts today, and that's not an implication on the shirt producer, it's an implication on the shirt buyer. And you could imagine that the biggest percentage of people who are buying kids' wear are women. So the fact that these shirts still exist is not a great statement in the world. Really bad study that just came out. This study looked at performance appraisals inside of a company, and they showed a couple of things. The first is that women are more likely to be criticized in their performance appraisals for personality traits called aggressive, abrasive, never shows up in a man, in this company, never showed up on man's performance appraisal. More likely to be given critical feedback, whereas men are more likely to be given constructive feedback. You do really well at this, and you can do even better at this. A good friend of mine who's a retired investment banker, and I won't name her because it's not a good story for her to tell, but she tells it at Fortune's Most Powerful Women. She shows actually performance appraisals of a decision in which she was a part of. She was actually leading the decision, and they were trying to look at two candidates and who to promote to a managing director. And they ended up promoting the man. And she went back and looked at the data, and there was something really interesting that she found. The man and the woman were equally competent and rated equally as competent. The man's performance appraisal said, he's this, and he upsets the apple cart a lot, which is great. The woman was, she's this, and this, but sometimes she upsets the apple cart. And they went back and reversed the decision because she was so disturbed by looking at the actual data of the meeting. And she's a woman. So again, we're all complicit. There's a great article in The Atlantic called The Confidence Gap, and I won't go through all of the issues except for two that I point out. Fascinatingly, how many of you have written a job description for somebody you want to hire? And you sort of probably write that job description for Jesus. Like you want the most perfect person in the world, which isn't going to happen. Here's the rub again. Women will apply for a job description if they think they meet 100% of the characteristics. So you're already de facto cutting out women because nobody's going to meet Jesus's qualifications. A man will apply for a job if he thinks he meets 60% of the job characteristics. And he figures somebody will teach me the rest, I'll learn it. So that's a problem that is a female problem. You also see it in terms of, I have a friend who's a partner at a law firm, and she says, Kelly, every single time I interview associates, I have what a man says he can do for me, and I double what the female says she can do for me, and I've never been wrong. And that's not necessarily a man's fault. He's like, yeah. Sheryl talks about it in her book, where she and her brother took an exam together at Harvard. Her brother didn't study at all. She completely overstudied, which I'll talk about that phenomenon. Came out of the exam. She's like, I missed this question, and I totally bombed on this question. And her brother's like, I aced it. Totally aced it. And in fact, he got a C and she got an A. So, interesting. Here's the tiara syndrome, which goes back to the Sheryl Sandberg Harvard example. Women outperform men in school and in college, which is a real problem right now. And I think the educational system is probably failing boys to a disproportionate amount. But here's how women win in the educational system. We overstudy, we overprepare, we write 16 blue books as opposed to the one blue book that was required. We write a 20-page paper even though it was a 10-page paper that was required, and so we ace it. And then we get out in the corporate world, and we can out-prepare, over-prepare, out-study for a meeting, but if we don't speak up, it doesn't matter. If we sit at a table and we say something and the man says something and he gets the credit for saying that something, it doesn't matter. If we don't tell our bosses, if we're having what we said we did and men are doubling what they said they did, it doesn't work. So the skills that have made us successful in the educational system don't make us successful in the business world. Nobody's going to crown us with an A or a tiara if we don't talk about it, tout our own skills, toot our own horn, and talk every week about the business impact that we had that week. Favorite is the imposter syndrome, that feeling that somebody's going to discover that I really am not as smart as I look, and I'm really not as efficient or effective or competent as I look. And the beauty of the imposter syndrome, empirically, social psychology proves that women suffer from imposter syndrome at much higher rates. And the interesting thing is how good you think you are versus how good you are is inversely related for men. So, we hide behind the desk and say, don't discover me, and men are like, boom, boom, discover me. So again, these are issues, and the biggest thing I tell my students is fake it until you make it. That's the only thing I can tell you that will help. We've acted like men. So I wore neckties in the 80s. We try to swear, I don't swear because I want to be a man, I'm just Italian. But we try to get on the golf course or whatever we did. We tried to act like a man. And the thing that we failed to realize is that no matter how hard we try, men will always play that role better. They were born into it. Are there solutions? So this is the last part of my talk. I think I'm okay on time, right? Somebody's going to tell me. How much? 10. Oh my God. Never do this. I'm perfect. I'm bossy and perfect. One of my favorite companies for which I get lobbed with a lot of tomatoes is Walmart. They do well on the sustainability front, which is not my topic for tonight, but they actually are doing really well on their women's investment strategy. They are they're a Fortune 1 company. They have 4 females on their board. That's huge. They have a significant amount of women in positions of leadership. Mike Duke, the previous CEO, said, okay, we have this class action suit. You can talk about their motivation. I don't care, because I look at the outcome. I'm very Machiavellian. If they got there because there was pain or a lawsuit, great. I just look at what they're doing. So Mike Duke said, I want my leadership mantle to be what we are doing to retain, advance, and really engage women. The first thing he did was he said, I'm going to bring together a consultancy. And I'm not going to go hire McKinsey because they never do high-priced hiring of anybody. I'm going to bring together female leaders inside of the company as my internal consulting organization. And so this is 2012. Sorry, it's changed a lot in 2014 because these women rotate through every 2 years. And they've got enough women as CEOs or presidents that they can rotate through every 2 years. And there is a chair, and they came together and said, what's the issue? What's the current state, and what can we do to make it better? So the first thing they did was to develop a strategy. They really looked at 4 areas. How can we retain and advance women inside of the company? How can we attract top talent, particularly in their retail outlets? Because women do really well until it comes to store manager, and that's where they drop out. So how can we get them over that threshold? How can we promote the inclusion of women? And then finally, the part that I'm really focused on is what are we going to do in our entire value chain to focus on women? Because in fact, if you look at crop yields of women in agriculture, if women are given the same access to seed, to training, and to land ownership, which they're not in most developing world countries, their crops outperform male-run crops. And if we're going to have to feed 9 billion people by 2050, we need some outperformance on crops. So they go through and offer training to these women in their supply chain and their value chain. They offer financing so that there can be more women-owned businesses contributing back to Walmart. And it's a really long and involved process, which is fantastic. Their metrics are great. I can't share them with you because I have lots of NDAs. I've probably signed 15 NDAs with Walmart, and I still talk about them. Here's one of the outcomes. They just launched in their bricks and mortar stores a label on products that came from women-owned businesses. So they're supposed to launch it in October. There was so much excitement around it internally that they launched it in September. We don't have any metrics yet on if it's going to work, and I'm a little skeptical some days of does anybody care? But 88% of their consumer base are women. So if we don't care and we don't promote this, I'm really bummed at us. 2 more videos that maybe will give you tears. We need to engage girls at a younger age because oftentimes by the time we're my age, it's just too late. So I'm going to show you 2 videos, and we need to engage boys, and then I'll be done with TV watching and I'll finish.
Hi, Erin.
Hi.
Okay, so I'm gonna just give you some actions to do. And just do the first thing that comes to mind. Show me what it looks like to run like a girl.
My hair. Oh my God.
Show me what it looks like to fight like a girl. Now throw like a girl.
Aww. My name is Dakota, and I'm 10 years old.
Show me what it looks like to run like a girl. Throw like a girl. Fight like a girl. What does it mean to you when I say run like a girl?
It means run fast as you can.
So do you think you just insulted your sister?
No. I mean, yeah, insulted girls, but not my sister.
Is like a girl a good thing?
Actually, I don't know what it really, if it's a bad thing or a good thing. It sounds like a bad thing. It sounds like you're trying to humiliate someone.
So when they're in that vulnerable time between 10 and 12, how do you think it affects them when somebody uses like a girl as an insult?
I think it definitely drops their self-confidence and really puts them down because during that time, they're already trying to figure themselves out. And when somebody says you hit like a girl, it's like, well, what does that mean? Because they think they're a strong person. It's kind of like telling them that they're weak and they're not as good as them.
And what advice do you have to young girls who are told they run like a girl, kick like a girl, hit like a girl, swing like a girl?
Keep doing it because it's working. If somebody else says that running like a girl or kicking like a girl or shooting like a girl is something that you shouldn't be doing, that's their problem. Because if you're still scoring and you're still getting to the ball on time and you're still being first, you're doing it right. Doesn't matter what they say. I mean, yes, I kick like a girl and I swim like a girl and I walk like a girl and I wake up in the morning like a girl because I am a girl. And that is not something that I should be ashamed of. So I'm gonna do it anyway. That's what they should do.
If I asked you to run like a girl now, would you do it differently?
I would run like myself.
Would you like a chance to redo it?
Yeah.
Why can't run like a girl also mean win the race?
So you see a theme here between Nike saying make the rules, them saying rewrite the rules, and they couldn't have timed this better. It was during the whole softball in Monet, and it was universally fantastic timing. But for how many of you have sons in the room or grandsons? So this is a bit more sobering. I don't have boys. I know the data behind the challenge, the societal pressure on boys to be boys. This is a documentary that Gavin Newsom's wife, Jennifer Siebel Newsom, is that right? No, Jennifer Siebel Newsom, sorry. It's coming out in January.
Stop crying.
Stop with the tears.
Don't cry. Pick yourself up.
Stop with the emotion.
Don't be a pussy. Don't let nobody disrespect you.
Be cool and be kind of a dick.
Always keep your mouth shut. Nobody likes a tattletale.
Bros come before hoes.
Don't let your woman run your life.
You a bitch. What a fag. Get laid. Do something.
Be a man.
Be a man. Grow some balls. The three most destructive words that every man receives when he's a boy is when he's told to be a man.
We've constructed an idea of masculinity in the United States that doesn't give young boys a way to feel secure in their masculinity, so we make them go prove it all the time.
Within their peer group culture, each of them is posturing based on how the other boys are posturing, and what they end up missing is what they each really want, which is just that closeness.
In good times, guys are like really close to each other, but when things get a little bit worse, you're on your own.
From middle school, I had 4 really close friends. Once I kind of went into high school, I struggle finding people I can talk to because I feel like I'm not supposed to get help.
Our kids get up every morning. They have to prepare their mask for how they're gonna walk to school. A lot of our students don't know how to take the mask off. What is it you don't let people see? Almost 90% of you have pain and anger on the back of that paper.
If you never cry, then you have all these feelings stuffed up inside of you, and then you can't get them out.
They really buy into a culture that doesn't value what we've feminized. If we're in a culture that doesn't value caring, doesn't value relationships, doesn't value empathy, you are going to have boys and girls, men and women go crazy.
I had anger issues in high school. I felt like an outcast.
I've been suspended at least once every year I was here.
We would just look for trouble and just try to fight.
Boys are more likely to act out. They're more likely to become aggressive. Most people miss that as depression or see it as a conduct disorder or just a bad kid.
I felt like just giving up on life. You know, I actually had suicide thoughts in my head at 6th grade.
I felt alone for a long time, and I actually thought about killing myself.
Whether it's homicidal violence or suicidal violence, people resort to such desperate behavior only when they are feeling shamed and humiliated or feel they would be if they didn't prove that they were real men.
If you're told from day one, don't let nobody disrespect you, and this is the way you handle it as a man, respect is linked to violence.
If I can man up, why step down from that, you feel me?
It's like instinct.
So man up. Man up. Man up. Man up. Pull some fucking balls. Act like a man. Be a man.
Be a man.
For my kids, I was gonna end this hyper-masculine narrative here.
I am so glad this movie is coming out because I think this is an issue that we aren't discussing enough, which leads into all the other phenomena that I've just shown you. Just a few more thoughts. Men are really starting to step up, and there's a lot of push in the corporate world, and particularly in the MBA world, of training male advocates, making them aware of this data, which I've really almost never had a man say after I've given a talk, wow, this is BS, I get it. What can I do to help? But it's a matter of creating awareness, showing them the data, and then giving them tools to stand up and be male advocates. Men, so I'm going to point out Jim in this context. Empirical evidence suggests that men in the workplace who have a working spouse and daughters are the best sponsors you can have as a woman because they are the least likely to discriminate and the most likely to sponsor you, to sort of put their decision-making power and their authority behind you to say, consider her, put her out for a promotion, give her more power, give her more responsibility. So I tell all my MBA students, the minute you get into your company, find a man with a kick-ass wife and daughters, because he's going to be your best sponsor. We are all reclaiming the feminism word, men and women. There's a great social media campaign on men, famous men holding out signs of why they are a feminist. And you know, the word feminist became so wrongly associated with a whole host of things. And there's a great neo-feminist movement that I'm seeing on campuses, particularly amongst undergrads, who are saying, yeah, I'm a feminist. And my generation hated that word. I just got introduced at a conference 2 weeks ago as a feminist, and I was getting ready to walk on stage, and I was like, ugh. But I had to get over it really fast and say, yeah, I actually am. Women are our own worst enemy. Madeleine Albright has the best quote ever, that there's a cold place in hell for women who don't help other women. And I could give a whole talk on girl violence, and all of us would relate, and men would sit there and go, yeah, I saw this in my company. I couldn't figure it out. So my advice is to celebrate other women every single day as much as you possibly can, particularly because we are bad at celebrating ourselves. So it's easier to celebrate each other. The last assignment in my MBA class for both men and women, because I have both men and women in the class, is I say to my students, I don't want you to leave here with this concept of you can't have it all. Because you will never have it all if you're trying on somebody else's all suit or somebody else's definition of all. And men never get asked that question because they define their own all. Women try on society's version of all, their husband, mother-in-law, mother, women, mothers on the playground, whoever's defining the version of all. And I really don't let my students leave the classroom without defining their own all, because I think that's such a core focus. And then finally, one of my favorite authors for my play life, which I try to use as much as possible, is Anna Quindlen. And she has this her last book is called Lots of Candles, Plenty of Cake. And it's a retrospective on her own life. And I don't know if this resonates with you, but I'll just say it out loud. First, I was who I was. Then I didn't know who I was. Then I invented someone and became her. Then I began to like what I'd invented. And finally, I was who I was again. And this trajectory for me was super painful because of this Volvo driving soccer mom that I invented, and trying to hand roll sushi and drop it off to my girls' school at lunch so everybody else saw that I was bringing hand rolled sushi to them, and trying to work. And it just wasn't a good fit for me. And I say to my students again, and my students are from the age of 25 to 45 because I teach in all of our executive and MBA programs. If I can help you expedite the path to becoming who you were again, the world will be a better place, period. And so finally, almost on time, a little bit late, 2 minutes, that's not bad. Just my advice to everyone, men and women, is to go out there and be lionesses, not necessarily the sleeping lion who's in the shade tree in the jungle, but just to go out and roar. So thank you guys so much for the opportunity, and I'm happy to have questions.
So, Kelly, we can do one of two things.
Yeah.
Do you want the questions now, or do you want to know the Cal USA game? Let's do the questions. Let's do questions.
No, I want the bad news.
No, let's do questions.
Well, if it's really bad, I can stay here longer. If it's
You can stay here longer. Yeah. No, we'll try and have her catch the last quarter at least. You never know.
All right.
Miracles do happen, and I've seen it in a Cal game.
Hate Etsy.
Yes, yes.
Sorry.
So we do have a few questions, and I'm happy to take any more questions if you have. Just raise your paper. But one of the first things that I ask is about to be asked is, what are the 1 or 2 simple steps that we can do as individuals to help change this gender gap and confidence gap and try and eliminate this tiara syndrome in women?
I think the first thing is just what I am. I'll just give you my own experience. I am shocked at the lack of awareness of the data. So I'm at Berkeley Haas, and I have a great dean, and I really like him a lot. And I'm developing a women's institute at Haas, and the first time I pitched to him why I should be able to do this, because I was told, no, it's a career killer, go to gender studies, not just by him, but by senior leaders at Haas. When I presented the data-driven case, it was like deer in the headlights. I mean, even in Silicon Valley, when I gave 12 slides of what's happening in the valley, they just didn't get it. So the first thing is just get the data and present it over and have 16 conversations in 1 hour. And then the next hour have 16 more, because men and women are not aware of the data. And this might sound reverse sexist, but if you don't get men into the solution, we're never going to win. So I have 25% men in this course that I developed at Haas 3 years ago. I should just give you a little history. It was a brand new course. I was told no the first time I proposed it. Second time I proposed it, they're like, nobody's going to take it, but let's do it next year. We don't want to influence our ratings on Business Week. And the third year, I taught it, and it closed within the first 2 days of bidding. First year I've taught this course, I literally wanted to throw up every day before I taught the course, because this is not my area of expertise, and it's super hard to get up in a top 10 school and teach something. Anyway, end of the year comes, and I get this May comes and it's getting ready to be graduation. I get this email from the dean that says, we need you to show up at graduation. I'm like, I hate grad. It's like 3 hours in the sun at Greek Theater. And he said, well, you're going to win an award. You get the Professor of the Year award. And now I've taught my expertise area for 20 years in sustainability. I got 1 award at Michigan. And this is the first year I taught this class. Anyway, fast forward, I now have 25%. I had 2 men in the class that first year, and now I have 25% men. So if you don't get men into the discussion, it's a problem. And the last thing I'll say, short-winded, sorry, women need to reclaim their femininity.
Yeah.
Like, it serves us well to actually be women. All the research, there's a great article in the Washington Post if you're interested called Gender Judo. And it shows that the more masculine of a task we have to do, like firing somebody, cutting a whole business unit, the more we bring our femininity into that process, the better off it goes. One of my faculty colleagues at Haas teaches negotiation skills. She's very unpopular for this one study, which I love. She shows that the more women appropriately flirt, it's not to say we zip our zipper down to our belly, but just appropriately flirt in a negotiation, the more likely we are to gain more in the negotiation outcome. I know my students are like, I'm not going to do it. Right, I'm not going to do it. Well, here's my line to you, which I learned, somebody told me at a really young age as a banker, man, great sponsor. He said, I'll never forget this. He said, Kelly, if you focused as much on being effective as you focus on being right, you'd be the CEO of this company. And it was a huge slap in the face, like, but I'm always right. And he said, yeah, but you need to be effective. Yeah. And I'm not saying flirting is effective, but being feminine, if you are truly feminine and are comfortable, can be a really effective strategy. Sorry.
No,
I'm going to try to answer faster.
No. I think one of the things that I can relate to that, especially coming from the business many years ago and growing up in the business, my name is not as easily recognizable for most people. And I've actually had bosses who told me before, drop the MS, just be as gender neutral as possible. I mean, they've actually told me that because if we're going to go to a meeting and it's a male-dominated room, they say, don't call yourself Miss Maravik, or just leave it as is and let them assume that it's a man. So I was flabbergasted. I was young, I didn't know any better, so I did that. So I wish I had mentors at that time who were as supportive in that environment and just say, be who you are. So lesson learned, needless to say.
And here's one thing about millennials, the men are equally as comfortable with the younger, they are like, I don't want to work 60 hours a week. You go, wife, get out there.
Exactly.
I want to have dinner at home with my family. I don't care if she out-earns me. And we don't know if that's going to actually be okay once they get out there, but they're much more comfortable with their feminine energy.
I think so. I'm very happy with the progress that we're making nowadays. And speaking of emphasis on education too, I think if we want to pursue increase in women's pay, especially in Silicon Valley, I think there's a lot of emphasis in STEM programs for kids now. What have you found in your interactions with some of the tech firms around the area in terms of what progress, if any, they've actually done in those areas?
Well, the first thing is I've had no interaction with tech firms, which probably tells you a lot. I'm a big fan of Google's because they released the numbers first and they were transparent and they said, here's the problem. And then all the other companies had to follow. I think their issue, we've always resorted to, it's a pipeline issue. And I think that's a small percentage of what's happening, but I think what's coming out lately is it's a cultural issue. That women get into tech, into coding, and they just aren't comfortable because of how the environment is. And cultural issues are much harder to change. Individual issues are easier. Policy issues aren't easy, but they're circumscribable, but cultural issues are really tough. And I don't know a lot about STEM except that it's not working. And the way that we have been doing it, it's not working. And to tech, I say, you guys are the masters at being disruptive on every other level, so let's be disruptive in STEM, and we haven't figured that out yet. Big fan of Girls Who Code. It's a super phenomenal organization, and when they start it with young girls and their code camps, 9% of the girls say they want to major in computer science in college. And you ask them why, it's because they're nerdy, pale men who stay up all night inside of a darkened room, and it's just not where I want to go. At the end of their 1 year with Girls Who Code, 91% say that they want to major in computer science. I don't know how that's going to play out in terms of who does, but it's a huge, too Italian to talk like this, it's a huge impact.
One last thing I want to bring up is when I looked at Kelly's presentation, me being a capitalist, I was really interested in how the impact this study does in terms of how companies position themselves selling to women. So I hope you don't mind, but I want you to share that Abercrombie and Fitch ad that you showed in your presentation, because I think it's very telling.
Yeah, it still makes me sweat.
Yes.
Because I have been in an Abercrombie and Fitch, and I've had the loud music blare into my ears and the perfume move into my sinuses. But there was a product, how many years ago was my TED Talk, 2014, 29?
20, yeah. Yep.
There was a product launched in 2008 in Abercrombie Fitch called the Ashley Bikini Push-Up Bra for 7-year-olds. And the actual ad was, develop the come hither look. And it was astounding, you know, chills inspiring, but again, the fact that that product was able to launch because they deduced that somebody wanted this product is what's frustrating. It didn't stay on the market too long. They did not take a hit for it reputationally. They've taken hits since then, but that was not the hit they took reputationally. And I had a 7-year-old at the time, and so I was totally mortified. My girls are not allowed to shop there. I'm so happy because it gives you a massive headache to go in there. But
any questions? Yes, yes.
My question is, has there been any research done on young ladies that go into an all-girls school and how successful they are migrating into either software, coding positions, or high tech in general?
Can you hear the question in the back?
So she asked about younger girls going to all-girls education and their matriculation into high tech or science or computing much higher if you get them at the middle school years, because that's when they start to separate or be dissuaded from going into those fields. So it's much higher. I have a lot of cognitive dissonance about this. My older daughter, we did pull from public school and put her into private girls' middle school. And I just was worried about it because it's not the real world. And my fear was she's not going into an all-female world, so is this the right thing to do? But looking back, it was the most amazing thing we did for her because she just learned a completely different skill set than she was learning in a co-ed. She's now in a mixed-gender high school. And then my younger daughter stayed in the mixed-gender middle school, and so it'll be interesting to compare. But the fact of the matter is, my older daughter in high school has coding in the high school that their kids went to, and she has no interest whatsoever.
My daughter, just to share a little more, so we lived in Massachusetts. She was born and raised in Massachusetts. She went to USC.
Oh, what's the score?
Not one, she's a double Trojan. So. But anyway,
ouch.
She was always in all-girls school. And from kindergarten to third, it was private, but it was Meg's. And then she went into an all-girls school. And I have to say, I am a proud mother. She's done extremely well because there were no boys in the classroom to interfere, to cause them to feel less than what they had to say was an adequate representation of whatever the question or subject matter was. And she's done really, really, really well. And she does well with guys and gals.
Well, that's probably a testament to her parenting.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, yeah. All the evidence says if you get girls at middle school into single sex, they do so much better. Yeah.
Question over there.
Yeah, one of the elements of my work is I do efficacy coaching for high potential women in leadership through Korn Ferry.
Oh, nice.
And I'm curious about your personal insights or vision about how we can kind of cross-pollinate. So you have all this percolating in academia and the data and the vision and the commitment, and you know I'm over here in the corporate sector with the really working with these high potential women and people of color in leadership. What do you see as the pathway for us to really collaborate? You know, and also public sector and nonprofit sector, and how do we really combine our resources to create some synergy and some outcomes?
You guys are not giving me easy questions, and now I'm worried about Cal losing.
But I mean,
it's a really good question.
Right, personal narrative. So it's not really that. It's not like a challenge question. It's,
right.
It's
no, I agree.
From your heart. What do you see?
Well, so I have been really fortunate. I was really nervous. I'm a public school professor, so we don't have a lot of salary on that side, so we make a lot of money on the outside, like our consulting, which is crass, but whatever, I do. And so I had a great consulting practice in sustainability. I switched to women, and I thought, okay, there goes my external salary. It's actually, I've gotten more asks on the women's stuff, so I'm on 4 boards for 4 companies, specifically on their Women's Advisory Council to see how they can elevate the status of women in their own companies, and a couple of strategic, I sound like Bush, strategery, some strategery on that facet is, the first thing is to start with the data case, the why. If people don't understand why this makes sense, then they feel like you're just shoving it down their throat. So it is the business case for why, not the ethical or moral case, as much as I think that's the right way to start. It's not the effective way to start. The second is to have it in the hypo world, so in the high potential, to start younger, because by the time they're partners, the biggest thing I hear is that I don't want to work for a woman, from women. Don't make me work for women because they think I need to go through the school of hard knocks because they did. So it's to start younger down with the men and the women in the high potential leadership programs and get them engaged with this discussion. So I'm writing a case study on this right now. One of the worst, I shouldn't say worst, one of the least effective things a company can do to actually move the needle is to name a chief diversity officer. No impact, 0. It's what do you call it? Externally focused. It's not, it just looks good on the website. One of the single biggest thing that moves the needle, at least on gender, I don't know the rest of diversity, but I have to think it's true, you can't be what you can't see. So if you don't have a woman at the top, you see numbers move when you have a woman at the top. Yeah, it's homophily. Like, we tend to hire and hang out with people just like you and me, and if I can't be what I can't see, I'm not going to want to go there. So those are kind of 2 of the best strategies. The third is to set targets. So quota is a bad word, but company leaders, CEOs who set targets, really successful because we're all type A, particularly in the business world, and if there's a target, we want to bust it out. But the best CEO I've ever worked with said, I don't want a company target. I want to go into our business units and see where women are faring the worst and set targets based on each business unit. Because if I say I want to be 50% women across the board, HR is going to be 70, so it's going to skew, or 80 or 90. So I want to go into our women impacted business units and say, meet the target. And then building it into performance appraisals. It's really similar to the sustainability case. Make this part of the CEO's agenda, and that tends to move. But start with a data case. That's why I always start with the economic analysis first. Because then it's like shooting fish in a barrel, because I've already got them in the barrel. So anyway, I'm going to turn it back over to our fearless hosts, and thank you so much. And it is not lost on me that he has a pink purple tie. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly, and thank all of you again for being part of our community tonight. It's very heartening to Bonnie and me that we could produce this because we went to a campfire. And I just wanted to offer one thing. I was in a discussion at the reception before we started tonight with a group of women, and I made the comment that, I mean, in a way we're talking about liberating ourselves, certainly liberating ourselves from a gender perspective. But for me personally as a man, the gay liberation movement, gay men, gay women, and what's happening in the world of marriage equality and gay rights has been a process of throwing away the old rules of what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. And it's really helped me personally as a man discover parts of myself that I wouldn't have been able to get in touch with without my gay men friends and my gay women friends. So we're at a time of consciousness that's unprecedented. And there's a lot of work to do. We're not done by any means. But I think it's very hopeful that we're not rigidly obeying the old rules, and that we can invent new rules for ourselves as a community of men and women and races and religions. And I'm very optimistic, and Kelly, you've really delivered a powerful message to us tonight. And again, just thank you for engaging with us tonight. It's very valuable to Bonnie and me. Maravik, why don't you come and say something?
She's going to say anything.
She really wants me to sing Volvo Driving Soccer Mom, but I will spare you. I didn't have enough wine to be able to do that. If I had known, I would have brought my karaoke machine, courtesy of my mother, who provides it to us every Christmas, by the way. So anyway, what I just wanted to say first and foremost is thank you again, Kelly. This was really wonderful. I was very glad that we were able to do this. And the one thing that I wanted to just also thank Jim and Bonnie as being part of this wonderful organization is the fact that they allowed this team to be able to have a group like the Women's Roundtable, because again, it's not differentiating between men and women. It's just capitalizing on the strength of each other and finding ways to not only communicate, but collaborate in a way that helps us all achieve the financial goals that we want in life. So it's all that. It's neither trying to be better than the other, so to speak. So, hooray. Kelly also brought some copies of her books, so we have a few copies up front. If you're interested in getting signed copies from her, please do so. Thank you again, everybody, for coming.